Hello, and welcome to Slate School and our conversation with Emily Roller and Francis Pollock about their work with the Midnight Oil Collective. We are so looking forward to this. We're coming to you live from Slate School in North Haven, Connecticut. And I'll just tell you a little bit about Slate School in case you don't know. Here at Slate School, we are absolutely committed to excellence in education, and we are delighted to present the Education Idea Lab. It's a unique virtual series that is always free and open to the public. It's a thought-leading event where we convene leaders and change makers and participants from all sectors of education and innovation. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Julie Mountcastle, and I'm head of school at Slate School. So Slate School is an independent 501c3 nonprofit K-12 school where education is focused on cultivating creativity, fostering ingenuity, and inspiring a deep passion for lifelong learning. At Slate School, we've formed a community that is constantly striving to improve practice, to create meaningful educational experiences for learners of all ages, and to change the landscape in education. Slate School convenes experts for important, authentic conversations about education, and these online dialogues like today's are always free and open to the public. So we're delighted to have all of you with us today. I'll introduce our guests briefly, and then we'll get right to the heart of it because they're going to tell us all about the Midnight Oil Collective. And I think it's just a groundbreaking bit of work. So Francis Pollock. Francis is a composer by trade and a founder and CEO of Midnight Oil Collective. She writes primarily for the stage and currently has operas and musical theater performed all over the country. Recently, her work could be seen at San Francisco Symphony, Opera Grand Rapids, Greenville Light Opera, Kaufman Center, Chicago Lyric Seattle, Chautauqua, Opera Omaha, so many others. So when she's not writing theater, she's directing or producing it. And she is a proud angel investor in early stage work and is always enthusiastic about finding ways to bring art and entertainment closer to the innovation space. She's got a bunch of degrees and she is a fabulous human. Emily Roller. Emily is also a founder of Midnight Oil Collective, and she is the COO. She has a wide breadth of experience from all across the arts. She's been in education, nonprofit administration, technology startups, and that you'll see the connection there in a minute. Most recently, she curated an educational series that helped artists develop entrepreneurial mindsets and skills at the Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale and at the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance. So her work for the stage, okay, just in case you thought that was all she did, her work for the stage has been performed at venues including Washington National Opera and Opera America. She also has a whole handful of swanky degrees from amazing schools, and you'll see how brilliant she is in a moment. Friends, welcome. I'm so excited to be having this moment at last.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Yeah, we're just delighted to talk. Ever since we became aware of the work that Slate did, we just found so many alignments with the way that we think as well. So this is just an exciting opportunity for us.
Oh, that's so great. Emily, you came first. I think you came out to Slate School this summer, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Francis joined. I'm so thrilled. Well, listen, I don't want to take too much time before we get right into this. I think everybody just needs to know what Midnight Oil Collective is, and then maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of your creation story. What was the genesis for this incredible endeavor?
Yeah, absolutely. I will take the what we are, and you can talk about where we came from, if that's all right. So Midnight Oil Collective is it started, well, I guess I'm jumping into the origin story, but it started as a group of artists who were all really frustrated because what we were seeing across the creative industry is that the work that we were most passionate about, the work that we felt like was going to change culture, the work that was going to be exciting to audiences just wasn't getting to production. We were doing lots of commissions. We were, hired to star in things. Some of us were actors. Some of us were screenplay writers. Some of us were musical theater writers. And we were being hired to write other people's work, but we were doing all of this original content creation that just wasn't finding its way to production, much less to an audience. And so we did, the earliest version of us was a close examination of why that was. What are the blockades that are keeping artists from getting their work from the page to the stage, if you will? And what we found is that it's as is in so many cases where people don't have access to certain areas, what it is a systemic breakdown of who is in charge of producing work. And so what we did is we started to really examine that and to try and create a system in which we were supporting artists to be their own independent executive producers of their work. And do now that I've taken over the origin story, do you want to talk a little bit about either of those topics?
What does that look like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, a lot of times the way that I like to think about this is when you have somebody in tech make something, or you have any sort of invention or patent or something out there, any piece of intellectual property, a lot of times there are two different paths that it can take, right? You can license this work out, or you can build a company around it, and the person who invented it becomes, the leader, or CEO, or an executive in the company and helps drive the vision forward. But in art, what we were finding is we only had one pathway. If we were writing something, we basically only had the option to, license it out or sell it. And that means a lot of times we'd feel detached from our work. Like Francis was saying, the work we cared about the most, it felt like it was getting stuck. We weren't really sure how to attract the attention of, sort of the producers or the studios or whoever it was that we were trying to work with. It can be a long process of submitting and waiting and maybe not getting any feedback, even if you weren't accepted, or if you are accepted, you have a moment, but then there still aren't next steps, right? And so we were just kind of, and across the board, we were all running into that pattern. And so we thought well, if this other option of building your own company around it and pushing it forward exists in other fields, why not in the arts? Why can't we do this with musical theater? Why can't we do this with film? And of course there are independent productions in both, but it's hard when there aren't sort of systems to support it. And so, once in a while you'll get, very entrepreneurial people who do take their own work and self-produce it. But in general, it's if you've gone through all of the various degrees programs that we all went through, it doesn't train you how to do that, right? You don't know how to form, an LLC around your company. You don't know how to bring on investment. You don't know what your options are for financing. You wouldn't know how to start maybe rethinking more equitable terms, because you may not even have any idea what the terms actually are when you're licensing it out. You know what to expect from your contract, but you don't really know anything else about how that machine works. You're never involved in the budgeting. That's not a decision that, artists have. And a lot of times people are well, of course, because artists don't want that. Artists just want to focus on their work and they just want to make the things. But when you don't have that, you run into situations, which I know both of us have run into, where maybe your collaborators aren't paid as well as you would have wanted them paid, or there are certain aspects of the production process that that you don't like, but you have no control over, but it's got your name all over it. And it puts you in this really difficult, and it feels like you lack agency and power over these situations. Not to mention you're just sort of continuously waiting on somebody else to take on your work and do it for you. And so I guess that takes us to what we are. We thought we need to build a system that supports creators so that they can take their work, so that they can truly, structure around it, push it forward in a meaningful way, and really make a living off of it. So yeah, Francis, I can toss it back to you.
Yeah. So what we did is we created, we call ourselves a different kind of studio. So basically what it is we work with artists to craft projects, like Emily said, like companies. And we empower those artists to figure out how they're going to do the financing, how they're going to do the structure, how they're like cutting people in. I mean, it's all very like business, finance, and legal, which sounds really boring, but that's how you change the world, is interrogating those systems. Yeah.
Wow. I shared with our students today. I was telling you before we came on, I shared with them, that you're going to be coming for a visit to Slate School tomorrow. They were so excited. And I in describing what you do, I just held up the website, and it's where it says creators investing in creators.
Yeah.
And I think that's such, like, I don't know who thought of that, but fantastic. It's so clear. And I think sometimes when we're talking about this, I don't know what most people think of as arts as like a feeling thing. And the financial side of it, which we think of as a thinking thing, how do those two things actually go together? And I'm so thrilled that you're doing this work, because I can't imagine how many artists we've lost, the work that we haven't seen because it didn't get to somebody who could make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'm sure you probably have, lots of stories about people that you've known who had something that was really special, but it just didn't capture the imagination of the handful of people who had the ability to make something happen with it. So
it's most artists, right? Everyone talks about Hamilton, right? And the raging success that Hamilton is. It's in tech terms, it's a $1.6 billion plus unicorn, right? Like, that's like, they love numbers like that, right? But what they don't see behind that story is that Lin-Manuel Miranda was literally like hand-selected and mentored by Stephen Sondheim. And Stephen Sondheim was literally hand-selected and mentored by Oscar Hammerstein. And so you see a lineage of handpicking, sort of like it's like a dynasty of just individuals who have access to these spaces. And that's not the world I want to live in. Like, that's not culture. That's not, creating equitable and accessible spaces for everyone to express themselves. And I loved what your students said, or I loved how you described what we do to your students, which is, it is the feeling about like the art, because so often what artists are doing in trying to express their feelings through their art is they're trying to express how they would like to see the world change. And it only goes so far if you can only put it into a movie or a musical or a painting. There's a whole other world where it's like you can take that piece of art and you can activate the world that you want to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always say, so I'm personally very proud of our thank you for that compliment where you talked about creators investing in creators, because that's our mission. I'm also really proud of our vision, which is liberated creators liberating creation. And of course we mean, I know,
that's great.
Thanks. I really love it.
I love that word, liberating, right?
Yeah.
Because it says so much.
Yes.
It says so much. Because there is a feeling of trapped.
Yes.
When you feel like you have something to say and you can't get anybody to hear it.
And it is exactly that. And it's also liberating creation as like the creator's state of mind, and creation as it applies to like creating something, but it's also like the world that you want to be in, creation, right? Yeah. And so we mean it, and we mean it that like do both in your art, like be the most liberated creator and the most like expansive creator with your work, and then with the production behind it, be like create the world that you want to be a part of.
Yeah. And keep both of those things just fully aligned. Yeah.
And I want to be sure, because I have the impression, I know the both of you as like already incredible collaborators. And so I'm sure that what you're creating here is also wholly collaborative system too, right? So it's not like I have an idea, it's my idea. I'm frustrated because nobody will listen, but I'm going to do it my way. And it's much more than that, right? Can you talk about what it looks like in practice for someone to bring a project through?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because there can be what we often talk about as like a scarcity mindset in our field. And that definitely does tend to lead to sort of a competitive attitude, or like, hey, if I'm going to try to get my work out there, I need to really protect my contacts. I need to protect my networks. Like I need to, it can have that feeling to it, even though as artists, there's a lot of tension there a lot of times, because as artists, we were drawn to it because probably we loved collaboration and we loved an experience of being part of something that was with a group. And so it's this weird tension that starts to exist when you start to pursue this career professionally. And it was one of the things that was definitely on our minds when we organized ourselves. And so what we did to combat that and set up the environment that we knew would be best for creation and best for getting these projects off the ground is we initially formed ourselves as a cooperative. And so our organization is a cooperative. That means, that everybody has a stake in ownership of the company, and everybody has a voice in how the company as a whole is governed. More interesting than that, though, the fund that we manage, which is a venture style fund that invests in early stages of these projects, it also has an element of profit sharing to it. And so basically what happens is once the fund becomes profitable, everybody that we funded gets a piece of that funding, whether or not it was their show that blew up. Because we know in the arts, not every time is it going to, not every piece is going to succeed realistically, right? That's the same with tech. It's why these things were, it's why these style of funds were invented, right? Because some things are very high risk, but high reward. And 1 or 2 out of 10 is gonna make it. But those will probably make it really big. And it's similar math in the like musical theater world, right? Where 20% of musicals recoup. It's actually a little bit better than in the startup world where they usually say 10%. So we have that math that we're working with, right? But what's really cool about our system is if we do get a Hamilton out of one of our 10, then everybody who we invested in gets a piece of that. And we can still do that where the people who wrote Hamilton get a better than average deal on their return too, because the numbers are so off in that field. And so anyway, what this does is more to the point of collaboration. What this does is it allows artists to really be very, very generous with each other. And so what we do is before we fund any project, we bring them into something called incubation. And the point of incubation is to get a cohort of people to really, of professionals, again, usually with very different backgrounds, maybe different skill sets together repeatedly to work on each other's, to give feedback. And it can be creative feedback, especially at the beginning. It always starts with creative feedback on the work, impressions, ideas, thoughts, problems people are encountering. And then it grows to like creative feedback on, okay, well, how would we get this out there? And how can we align your production with the values of the work? And how do we design a really creative business model that can get out there? And how can I help you? And who do I know who is actually a perfect partner for you in this? And in that way, it starts to build this entire network of people who are pushing together for every project success, right? Because we know any project success is every project success. And we think that even that small innovation on the way our venture fund is set up, we would love it if other funds would copy that, right? Because it provides a really important safety net. It makes it more possible for entrepreneurs to consider taking this risk. And it creates such a collaborative mindset over this competitive mindset that can be really hard, because when you're an entrepreneur, it's hard anyway, and you feel alone a lot of the times, and it's very, very difficult work. So to at least feel like you have a community of people who are, incentivized in every possible way to have your back, it's really nice. Yeah.
How have you collected these people? Right. So I mean, obviously, one of the things that you're saying here is that you have to have, I mean, it's not 15 composers sitting in a room, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have like a very wide variety of experience. So where have you found these people who are, I don't know, who are advising in the cohorts? Or are they, everybody who's advising in the cohort is also someone who's got their own project in the cohort?
Yes, exactly.
So those people, is there a mechanism where the artists, you know what, maybe this is a whole mistaken sense in my head that the artists are separate from the business people. It doesn't have to be like that, right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm left with from my life. And it's, I can't change my mindset in just a short time, I guess.
Yeah. And incubation, it's just the artists together. And we have, MOC people are also, Midnight Oil Collective folks are in the room as well. Most of us are artists though. And a lot of us, we started with 9 founders. Every one of them is a professional artist. And we brought projects together and we just started working on them together. And we keep that same sort of mindset. We've had a few rounds now of incubation. So our first one was really us experimenting on our own work and working on our own, the 9 founders working on these first projects that we brought together. And a lot of us had been collaborators, but a couple of people were actors and a couple of people were, some people were writers, some people were composers. Maybe one of us met, a couple of people went to school together. Somebody was just a friend of a friend, whose work that we'd seen, and we got introduced to them and we got really excited about including them and just found ourselves to really clicking. And so really went across the board in this initial group. And so we worked on it. And once we felt confident that our projects were going somewhere, we sort of expanded our network. Our next round was, again, you have 9 people. All of us had networks of collaborators that we'd been working with. I mean, some of us had been in the field for, 50 years or, so we had a variety of people that we could then start to pull in for a second round to see if we really had something here. And really it's just, you start talking about the idea, and if people get excited about it, and they have a cool project, we're like, okay, let's start working on it. By the 3rd iteration, we started to realize, like, okay, if we're going to do investment, certain projects are better fits for investment. There have to be, as we're getting ready to really open a true investment fund, we do need to focus in on projects that are better fits for investment rather than maybe getting a grant or pursuing other types of funding, which is all totally fine. But we don't want to make an investment in a project that isn't going to make a return, that doesn't have a chance of making a return.
Right.
And so we started to have a more of an application process that we developed that also allowed us to open it up very broadly, and really just by word of mouth and the fact that artists really don't have a lot of options. We got lots and lots of people interested in applying and talking with us. We're cooperative, so it's always a democratic process of figuring out who gets in. We try not to let it rest on 1 or 2 people who are. Again, we're trying to avoid that, and in fact, as artists take on funding, they're part of that process. So we're building in more and more voices to help us recruit and identify and bring along more projects.
Do you ever say to somebody like, "Not yet"? This project is like.
Oh yeah, it's the majority, it's the most people, right? Because oh my gosh, if we're going to make this change in the world, there has to be such a shift in so many things, right? And so like I really truly believe that like systemic change is often quite slow. And like, if you're really going to influence something that's not just about like burning it down and like, and not burning it down in a sustainable way, but like actually like brick by brick, taking it apart and building something better, then it's going to be about like methodical, just patience with the struggle. And one of the things that we've learned is that there's so many barriers that artists face in being their own entrepreneurs, right? One of the things that they face is you have to have some sort of like baseline, like financial security and some baseline, just like, you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to any of that, but like just making sure that you're at a place where you can devote the time and the mental space to this is so important. And we've tried to do through a combination of grants and whatnot, we try and like help artists carve out that time, but it's so important. Another thing is that like, you got to be like really down to do the work, because building something takes a really long time. And one thing that we've seen with our own artists is that people who think that it's going to happen fast are often very disappointed with our process, because it doesn't happen fast. You're going to have to struggle with your own content, the art itself. You're also going to have to struggle with like, how do you want people to get paid, and like, where's that money coming from? And all of that is a mindset that we as artists are often not even given, right? So like, we're not educated in it.
Yeah. So where do
know?
you get that? How do you all build that in, that financial education, so that you can make those decisions for yourself without just relying on others?
It's two ways. One is we do a lot of programming, and so we do our incubator and we do our accelerator, which always has like a financial and a legal bent to everything we do, right? So like, think about these things, think about these things, think about these things. These are like, this is the theory you need to like be able to digest. But the second thing, and the reason that I think that MOC and Slate School are such great collaborators, is because we do this through methodical project-based learning. And so the first step is, the first investment is, you're creating a mini model, a proof of concept of what your bigger project's going to be. And through that, you are learning how to handle, a small budget. You're learning how to talk to investors. You're learning how to like work with a team that you've assembled. And for a lot of us, we've never done that before. And so we need that incubator space to do that.
I can't tell you how exciting what you're saying is to me, because I mean, it's so wonderful that you've come along now, right? And that you're doing this work for people who are adults. But imagine what can happen if we start helping kids to know that that these are possibilities for them. Because when I think about the people whose work we haven't seen, who are adults, I also kind of get a little bit of the chill bumps when I think about, the child who is deterred from being an artist because from the very beginning of their imagining that, it seems to go hand in hand with this story of starvation or struggle. Right. And I mean, I think there's some romanticizing about that happens too, that I think is understandable, right? You want to make your difficult situation as palatable as possible, and you don't want to deter people from doing it, but it really isn't a very romantic struggle unless good work happens.
And one of the things that we try and dismantle a little bit is this notion that you have to be you have to starve in order to like feel the pain that creates good art. There's this amazing, this is maybe getting a little too like political, but like there was this amazing article in the Yale Daily News where they talked about, there was this low-income student that was talking about how everyone at Yale cosplays as a different socioeconomic status that they were. So like very like, so low-income students do their best to try and seem like they have the like acculturation to being to fit in at Yale, and then like people who come from very wealthy families
try to downplay it.
I go to
school in New Haven, right?
Yeah. And so actually like what we see is that narrative of like, you have to starve, you have to like suffer. It's often handed down by people who have never had to starve and who have never had to suffer. And the people who do best in our system are people who understand that they don't want to have a life. First of all, they don't have a safety net, but they don't want to live a lifestyle that's based on like struggling for your next thing, because there's nothing for them to rely on. And so actually we've seen the most resilient participants in our system being people who understand how much of a problematic narrative that is, that over romanticized narrative is.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So it all sounds fantastic. I'm completely on board. What have been the sticking points? What are some of the challenges? Because I mean, we don't need to starve, but sometimes we do need to struggle to find the things that we're building, right?
Yeah. I mean, and you really hit on it. Like, I think that one of the hardest things is really cultivating that resilience that it takes, and a sort of mindset that as artists, I think sometimes we're really told that we're special a lot, and it's this strange narrative, right? Where we're like, oh, you get told a lot, like, oh, you're very talented, and you've got such a gift to the world, and you should be allowed to just do that. And it's really interesting, right? Because having held many, many different jobs in many different roles, rarely is a job just one thing. And a lot of times there are things that you really love about your job and things that you don't like as much, but you have to figure out how to like cultivate that. And somehow that sense gets a teeny bit lost, I think, sometimes with artists. And there's this sort of idea that like, actually, but I'm so good at this, like I shouldn't need to worry about any of the other aspects that come along with it. And I'm not trying to be ungenerous here. And in fact, I feel like, there's been points in my life where I've been like, oh, I don't want to worry. Somebody else takes care of that for artists. We don't have to do that. But then what we find is we develop dependencies, right? And we become very dependent on agents. We become dependent on producers. We become dependent on this idea, even if we haven't had the agents or producers before, there's like this idea that somebody's going to come in, take this thing and make it for you. And I think fighting through that can be a little bit challenging. But I like Frances said, I think the people who are very successful in our system tend to come from backgrounds that are sort of like have developed that resilience in one way or another. And believe so deeply in the work that they're doing, have a strong vision for it, and are just willing to learn things that push themselves outside of their comfort zones and learn things that they've never been taught before or told were important before. And why we don't talk more about some of these entrepreneurial skills in general, I'm not sure. Again, like Frances said, it's one of the things we love about the way that about Slate's approach to education, is just when you have to go and do things, when you're learning sort of by just sort of immersing yourself in doing something, you learn so much. But when you're pulled aside and told, oh, actually, you should just be practicing the piano for ever, and that's all you should really be doing, or you should just be singing, or you should just be acting, or you should just be writing. Yeah, it's not a good balance. It doesn't teach you all of the things you need for this career.
Even when it's a positive, even when somebody's saying something that's positive to you, I was just having this conversation with somebody else today about how labels are limiters, even if it's a positive label. It's like, if you create the rubric, that's as far as you're going to go, right? Yeah. But if you say you can go as far as you can go, then there's no telling.
Yes. Go ahead. I just want to affirm that I also had that conversation with an adult. I don't know if you're having it with a child.
I did have it with an adult. Yes.
Amazing.
Actually, you win my conversation.
I know, right? I thought the other one, adult. I was saying the same thing. I was like, I don't know if like right now composer is the most inclusive term for how I feel about my artistry, even though it is the thing that I've been trained to do and the thing that I've done, very prolifically throughout my career, right? Because I also want to be like an interrogator, and I also want to be like economist, and I also want to be, a bookkeeper. Like I don't know, like I want to go back to kindergarten and I want to like put on all those hats and say like, which one, which ones excite me?
Yeah. Well, you're interested in the project of your life.
Right. Yeah.
right? And all of the pursuits that follow that. I was thinking before, I had a student once who was really interested in the singer Adam Levine.
Mhm.
And he said he was really struggling on how he would think about a project of, about Adam Levine that would include like thinking about mathematics. And then he realized that learning how Adam Levine makes money from all of the ways that his music is shared, reproduced, became the most fascinating piece of his work.
Yep.
17 cents here because he's also the composer, and 19 cents here because I was just like all of these incredibly complex ways of understanding the world mathematically came through this study of Adam Levine. So
there's this quote that I love, which I think that it can be sort of a platitude that like needs to be contextualized, but Andy Warhol did say that the highest form of art is business. And I think that's what he meant. Whoa. Which is if you can imagine your art doing all of the things that business does as well as being art, then you've done it,
I get that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm gonna piggyback on that, because here we talk about how every pursuit can be art.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
If you think about the incredible route that the mail delivery person takes every day to make the route shorter and efficient, or to be on the right side of the street, or whatever it is, or to come to the door, or to do whatever it is about that feels like art. The example I used to give about that is that my grandparents would wash the dishes, and it was so beautiful. Like if I could write a whole musical about my grandparents, like washing the dishes, standing at the sink, it just, it told everything about them, And so, business, the highest form of art, washing the dishes is art, all of these things that we've kind of been told not to think.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's possible that art is the highest form of business. I think that you can take that and you can reverse it. It's just that artists really need to hear that business is in there, and to not limit yourself to like one step of the creation process.
Yeah. And that we need to, it's integrated too, or so often even in our schools, or in universities, they silo everything off into different, entirely different schools, or entirely different departments, and rather than thinking about all of this as integrated, I love the project of finding out how Adam Levine makes money, because it's just like it's integrated, right? And you're like, oh, it's a full picture of the singer and the career and the way the world works, and just so many different things all at once. Whereas if you only looked at the songs, you're missing out on pretty important aspects. And if you're only looking at the money side of it too, you're viewing artists as, then they get into that problem where people are always so resistant to be like, oh, we shouldn't commoditize art, and we don't want to only make it about the numbers, and when we only look at the numbers when we're making things, it leads to different things, right? And that's true. You can go too far in that direction too, but when you have a love for the art and you have an understanding of the business, and like it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, if we're going to celebrate the wholeness of people, and I think actually, well, I don't know if I'm saying something that's true. I guess what I was going to say, if art is about seeing things that you don't understand, that you suddenly then connect to, if there's a part of that in it, then I feel that connection to what you're talking about here, right? Because I've not been connected to that side.
Right.
I was an actor. I had an agent who negotiated absolutely every deal. And I had a joke, like the producer calls my agent on the phone and you hear in the background the typing. No, she'd do it for less. And I think part of that is also true. We love what we're doing so much. We love it, but we don't have to. We can love what we do and still get paid for it.
Yes,
We can
absolutely.
be passionate about it. We can feel like we could feel completed by it in some ways and still get paid for it.
And it's so funny in the arts world, that almost feels like an insidious conversation to have, or it's like you're saying something salacious.
I
And
know.
I think that goes back to that mentality of like who can afford to stick around and who like actually needs to have that conversation.
Yeah.
That is so funny. I love that story about your agent so much. I mean, like I hate that experience for you, but like
I know. I know. She was great though in so many ways, but in that moment, not so much.
Yeah.
But but the sad thing is it was probably true too.
Yeah.
It was probably true. She was probably speaking the truth because of my misguided desperation to want to I just want to work as much as possible.
Yeah. It's really interesting. This got me thinking a little bit about how the world could look if the idea weren't like, how do we make this as cheap as possible, or how do we get people to work for as little as possible. And it got me thinking a little bit about what Taylor Swift's been doing. And so I think Taylor Swift is such an interesting example of somebody who combines, the art and the business in a really interesting way. And everybody knows, like right now we're in the midst of a big strike, right? With the film and TV industry. And the way that Taylor Swift was able to get her tour up at AMC is to go straight to AMC and to say, hey, I always want to treat artists right. I am totally happy to go buy everything that they have asked for. I understand that we can do that and exceed it. So let's make this happen. And it's easier of course, if you're Taylor Swift, that's a lot easier to do than if you're, the average artist. But I think it goes to show, if artists can start to feel empowered to think about the business side, and think about, and I think with Taylor Swift specifically, however you feel about her music, like she has figured out how to connect with her audience. She's figured out that, like, what you might call marketing piece, but for her, it's a very organic, connection that she's figured out how to make. Like, there's so many things that she does very, very well that has allowed her to become the household name that she is, and allowed her to be somebody that a lot of people gain a lot of inspiration from, and it's an interesting thing.
The piece that you missed, was that what she did was she actually bypassed Hollywood and she went directly to AMC theaters and is distributing right with them. And so actually what she's doing is she's changing the possibilities for all other artists to follow in her footsteps.
New pipeline now, whole different way.
Yeah, the structures aren't working, do your own.
Yeah. And I tell you what, for anybody out there who's been a parking lot parent at a Taylor Swift concert, sort of quietly commiserating at like it's 11:45 and she's still playing, at the same time, you're saying to yourself, well, I got to hand it to her. She's not, she is sharing her talent in such a generous way, right?
Yep.
She should get paid for it, right?
Pay for it.
Yep. And she's, she doesn't give the 50-minute concert with the hour-long, lead up group. She's out there every, and of course the big thing, she's out there in the rain too. So, she's at work. She recognizes the work in it too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a cool model. Yeah, it's powerful. And you just want everyone to be able to follow that.
Or follow or make their own.
Yeah, make their own. Yeah.
Make your own way to do it, and just have that way not be blocked because it's not the status quo.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what's so funny? I just wanted to say this. It's like I kind of want artists who are so used to being sort of like counterculture and like they like, they like move against convention and like, they like do their own thing. I want this to be the way that they are counterculture, where they're like, we're going to take like back the agency and we're going to like do our own thing.
Yeah.
Because right now we're so over dependent on institutions. It's not artistic.
Right.
We're supposed to be the radical ones doing theater in the basements, right? And so like, let's do that. And let's also figure out a better way of like producing and doing like our work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to kind of, jump away from the wider world of it now for a minute and just kind of get back to the, how you do it, how it works again. And I guess I'm wondering, you talked a little bit about how not every show is meant to be, right? Not every piece that you work on is going to be, I mean, almost none of them are going to be the Hamilton, but, not every one of them is going to be the falsettos, right? It's not, even a small legitimate success. So how do you talk to each other about that? What's the conversation in the group that says, let's see this through, but we're not sure that this is going to be the big one. Do you have that conversation, and what's that like?
We have it amongst ourselves. I think we have it like, individually. At the point where we're at, because again, we're still building, right? Like this is not a world that exists right now. And like we have this vision, but like the place that we're at, it just really comes down to the commitment of the artist, and if that artist needs to walk away at this point, then that's a very personal decision. But we're a community that by just the structure of our fund, we're going to last up to 10 years or more, and so like the idea is we're here. And if you want to engage, then we're here. And if you feel like you need to close down shop, like your LLC lapse, whatever, and walk away, that's okay. That's a decision, because we need that artist to be able to lead the vision.
Yeah.
And even before it gets to that point, we've learned a lot. We learned together about things. So we've had about 27 projects go through our incubator, I think. And we've made 9 investments. And that's of the projects that have gone through our incubator. And so we don't invest in everything that we come across. What we do try to also do is provide a lot of feedback. Earlier what you said was very interesting, because you said, how do you tell a project? Do you ever tell a project not yet? And I thought that was particularly insightful, because that's actually exactly what we say. It's not a no. With our projects, and actually we rarely have to do it, because once we have put out there what all needs to happen and sort of said, well, this is how you demonstrate traction. How have you demonstrated traction, or how are you planning to do that? Or once we kind of lay out like what needs to happen for something to kind of continue on, if a project isn't ready for it, they recognize it themselves, right? And we're saved a lot of that process, right? And if somebody brings a project that's maybe not the best, if an artist brings to us a project but it's like, I really don't care about the money and this isn't about making money, it's very easy to say, well, that's totally fine. Investment is about making money. And so at the end of the day, like investment isn't the right funding option. There are funding options. There are partnerships that you could potentially work on, or this might be a hobby also, which is fine. That's not to denigrate the quality of it, but it is to say like, it may be that you don't want to do this professionally, which is also totally fine. But those sorts of conversations I think can be had in such rather than just being like, no, that doesn't meet our standards, or that's not our criteria. It's just much more about sort of being like, well, what do you want? Do you want somebody then who's going to be very disappointed that you're not making money? Do you want a group of people who are all taking chances on each other, but with good intent that we're trying to make our money off of this? Like, no, that's going to be a lot of pressure if that's really not important to you. It's not a good fit, right?
Yeah.
And so not yet and not a good fit are a lot more of the way that we go forward. And I'll be the first to say, there is so much interest. There's so many interesting projects out there. We're never going to run out of people with really great ideas, really great work. As you said, our hearts get broken all the time when our incredibly talented colleagues leave the field. I think I think a lot of times people think that there's a lack of genius out there. They'll say, oh, Hamilton, that's genius. And I'm like, yeah, but I have seen things that are just as good sitting on hard drives for 10 years, that could be incredible with the right structures around them. And so for us, for me, I will be the first to say that there are probably more people who could hit all of those criteria than we than we can currently help. And that's part of the reason we're really intent on growing. And it's part of the reason why we hope to open many funds, beyond our initial fund. We think there's a lot of room out there.
So what does the world look like when you succeed at this? What's the dream? What's the dream?
So the world looks like our logo, right? Which is a circle with a lightning bolt in it, right? And what that means is that when you have a community of people creating together who are all invested in each other's work, that the benefit from doing that work, the profit, the upside, whatever you want to call it, is contained within that community. It's not going somewhere else, right? Because that's like where you get into people who are doing a whole bunch of work, but someone else is making a lot of money, right? And so when we think of our logo can be as small as our community of 10 artists, or our logo can be the whole world. But what it's saying is that the people who are doing the work in the community are self-sustained and supported by the work of that community. Yeah.
All right, then.
Yeah. So liberated creators, liberating creation, right? Creator state of mind, but also like the whole world.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about something that surprised you along the way? This is a question we ask our students, by the way. So at the beginning of the year, we ask at the end of the first project cycle, we ask the students 5 questions. I won't tell you what they all are, but one of them is what surprised you. And then at the end of the year, after their last project cycle, we ask them the same 5 questions, and then we just look at how they've grown over the year and the complexity of how they respond. Mm-hmm. And it's a great tool for us, and it's really fun and exciting to see, and I think it's empowering for the kids to talk about. And this question about what surprised you is always it's often a dynamic response. It's often something. Now I've really set the bar high, so good luck, friends.
Oh man, Amy, you gotta go first, because I was like, do I go cheeky with this? Do I go like
I know,
I'm self-editing.
I'm kind of in the same place, but I mean, I think we started in the pandemic. In a way, all of this is a surprise. I'll tell you the best surprise that I had, a positive surprise, was when we started, we really formed ourselves as a collective, and we thought it was going to be a much smaller group. And there was a point where we sort of had this idea of like, as we were learning more about how funding works in other fields, we had this idea that like, maybe we would open a venture fund someday. Maybe that's going to happen down the line, but we really envisioned that happening several years, after we'd already sort of done some work and built up enough of a reputation and like, done some stuff like that. Well, we went through an accelerator and we got the advice to reach out to the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Clinic at Yale Law School. And I was like, okay, let me write a letter about this. And I included that as like something that we were looking to do down the line. And we met up with an incredible partner in this clinic. And shout out to Sven, our lawyer, and suddenly within months we were opening this fund, and that was kind of a surprise to me that it was like, oh, we're gonna do
doing that now.
We're not taking this long route of like sort of doing this part-time and like slowly working on our own work and building each other up and setting up this cooperative in a certain way. Like suddenly we're fund managers. I tell you, when I went through school, the one thing I thought I wasn't going to be is an investment banker of any sort. And I also didn't think I was going to be a consultant. I remember being like, those are the things that other people do. That's not the thing that I do. And now I would say I'm primarily an investor and a consultant.
I don't like the labels, but maybe you need to come up with a new one, right?
Yeah, but doing that type of work, right? And in a way, it was I had dismissed that work in a way that I really should not have. I think you're exactly right. I actually think like kind of getting rid of those, because I'm also an artist and I'm also a creator and I'm also a teacher and all of these different things. But those are definitely big. So surprise, like you're into investing now.
You're doing it now.
Yeah.
Hey, so I said before that I thought that there might be some of the incredible Slate School students on this call tonight, and they are. There's a whole bunch of 6th grade students, and I want to give a huge shout out to the students of Wildflower and just say hey to you guys, and that there's so much good coming to your school, so much good at your school, and you are the part of it. So thanks for being on this tonight. And now I'm going to ask you guys anything you want to say to the Wildflowers, the 6th grade students from Slate School. Might be 5th grade too.
Well, first and foremost, we're meeting you tomorrow, right?
Woohoo!
Yeah, so can't wait to meet you. That's very, very exciting. And like, please come up and talk to us, whenever, like the things that we're talking about with adults are not like things that are only for adults. Like they're for everyone. And like us being able to interact with you wherever you are with your projects. That's what we love to do. We spend most of our day just talking to artists who want to do things. And if there was a way for us to just talk through, like, what's your vision? Like, how are you going to do it? That's all like we love to do.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
And you can dream very big. I think that's the other thing that we always say is like, if you have a big vision and then steps to get there, like you can achieve a lot of incredible things.
Awesome. So I have a sort of question that's just coming from my own personal point of view. Who's the Leontine Price person in this group, right? The Midnight Oil quote is a Leontine Price quote. Can you say the whole thing? I can't say it. I don't remember it.
The quote is, art is the only thing that you can't take a shortcut on. You must stay up and burn the midnight oil to do it. And we love that quote so much because that's it. Like you can't take a shortcut on any of these things. You can't hand it over. If you want it done right, do it yourself. And we love Leontine Price because of that. And like Leontine Price in and of herself is such a revolutionary. She didn't go in and burn down opera. What she did is she went in and radically created a space for herself, for people like her, for people following her path. And she did it without compromising her values. She did it, authentically. And opera's different now because of that.
Awesome. When I was a kid, we had this will speak to how old I am, which I don't really care, but we had the Christmas album that was Steve and Edie and Leontine Price.
That's
and and it was so, it was very different people, but combined talents in ways that were really, really wonderful. And that was like the first time I ever heard her. And I just thought that was such an incredible voice. Like, how did she do it?
I have no idea. You know,
Like-
did you know what a little fun factoid about Leontine Price is that she was the first opera that premiered at Lincoln Center at the Metropolitan Opera was Samuel Barber's Antony and Cleopatra, and it was written for her. You know?
Wow.
So she ushered in like if you think about the Metropolitan Opera as kind of like the opera institution of this country, she ushered in that new era of opera.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I actually just now am looking at the clock and it's 6:30 and it's
Wow.
just flown by. This conversation was even better than I thought it would be, and I knew it was going to be really great. I'm so excited about the future of the arts for everyone, and I'm so excited about the future of our collaboration at Slate School and beyond. I think only good can come from all of us working together and
Absolutely.
empowering these kids to get out there and demand that the model change.
Yes. Yes.
Make it change. To everyone that's here tonight and to everyone who watches this on YouTube at some point later, just thank you so much for tuning in. We want you to be a part of these conversations always, because we know that when we all think together about important topics, that things move. And maybe it's not fast, maybe it's not fast enough, but things do move. And we can do it all together, like Midnight Oil Collective. So thanks again. Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Francis. And thanks to everybody, including the 6th and 5th grade from Wildflower. Way to go, people. All right. See you next time. And see you tomorrow, Midnight Oil.
All right. Sounds great. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.